Welcome to The Wandering Naturalist, a Three Rivers Park District podcast.
I'm Angela, a wildlife biologist at Three Rivers Park District.
And I'm Brandon, an interpretive naturalist for Three Rivers Park District.
Three Rivers Park District manages over 27,000 acres of parklands in suburban Hennepin County and surrounding areas.
Join us as we wander from park to park and discuss the stories of the past, the nature in our present, and how these have shaped our parks.
Come explore with us, The Wandering Naturalist.
Welcome back to The Wandering Naturalist, everybody. Last time we talked with Mitch about how he's been doing research on nymphs and where they can be found around the state and on good places you can go within Three Rivers Park Districts to find different kinds of dragonflies. And now today I'm really excited because we have a very special guest.
Yeah, so Ami Thompson is joining us. She is someone that I have met through the Minnesota Dragonfly Society. And throughout the years, we've kind of been doing different research. And Amy's actually going to school to get her PhD with dragonflies and conservation biology. And she is researching a specific species, which I'm going to let her introduce. But she's doing it in one of our parks, Crowhassan Park Reserve. So thank you, Amy, for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing within the Dragonfly Society, but also with your research?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. A little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm in my 5th year of my PhD program right now, which means I'm done with all my data collection and I'm analyzing and I'm writing. And so I'm really excited to see what the data I collected at Crowhassan is telling me. But before I was in school to become a scientist, I was an environmental educator, and it was fantastic. I worked for the Wisconsin DNR and the Minnesota DNR, and then I was a national park ranger.
Hey, I was a national park service too.
Whoop, whoop.
That's why you wrote such a good book.
Well, so the book thing was I really wanted to personally challenge myself because a lot of the education I was doing had been written by somebody else. And I'm kind of creative and a little bit stubborn, and I wanted to see if I could do something on my own. So when I left the National Park Service, I started my own business. And I started consulting, and I met this amazing man named Carol Henderson. He works for the Minnesota DNR, and I did some work with him. And he told me, you need to meet Kurt Mead. Mm-hmm. And I said, anything Carol recommends I do because he is fantastic and is a really good mentor for me. So I met Kurt Mead, and he just got me hooked, interested in dragonflies. And that was my catalyst for thinking about what maybe I can write some lessons and put them together into a curriculum. And that was the origin of the book.
Well, I love it. I use it all the time.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. And Kurt Mead, like you said, is awesome. We've mentioned him a lot now. We should probably mention he works for the, since we've said his name so many times, he works for the Minnesota DNR. He works for the state parks up on the North Shore.
Yeah, Tattagooch State Park.
Yeah, so if you see a guy with a beard there, tell him that Brandon and Angela and Amy say hello.
Mm-hmm. And Mitch.
And Mitch.
That'll be fun because we'll probably get really confused.
Yeah.
Why do all these people know me?
I was just texting him in the green room, so he knows what we're doing today.
Okay. So now people have to say hi because he's expecting it.
The pressure's on, everybody.
So what is the focus of your research at Crowhassan Park Reserve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Mitch said that he likes to see which species live where and why, and I have sort of the same interest. But he's really interested in these really, really rare species, like the things that live in bogs and these really pristine rivers. My interest is in a really common species, maybe the most common dragonfly in North America. It's called the common green darner.
It says it right in the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I want to know, well, first of all, my curiosity began with just wondering, how do these things survive the winter?
It's a good question because, most insects do not survive the winter as adults.
Right. Yeah. So what do you guys think? You guys know, but, if you had to guess, what would you say? The color?
Magic.
Yeah. That's kind of what it feels like.
I think that the green color is because they're absorbing all of the other sunlight except for green, kind of like leaves. So they can absorb so much heat from the sun in the winter, they stay warm enough to survive.
I love naturalists.
That's a unique answer. I will play like the dumb here and be like, did they go somewhere? Did they leave?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're saying my answer is not correct?
Your answer is awesome, but not correct.
Oh.
I wish it were. Some of the adults, they migrate. They migrate like monarch butterflies. They migrate like birds. They get the heck out of Dodge when it gets cold.
That's amazing. We think of birds that migrate, and they're like, oh, yeah, I guess the monarch migrates too. And that's it. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that these dragonflies actually migrate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's just incredible.
It is. That's what my thought was, too.
Where do they migrate to?
We don't know yet. That's a good question. So with monarch butterflies, so I should say at the University of Minnesota, I'm in the monarch lab.
Okay.
So I'm advised by Karen Oberhauser, who has done fantastic work on monarchs. Also, I'm co-advised by Rob Blair, who studies birds. So I have this.
So you've got the two migrating groups advising you?
Yeah. So I had this really awesome opportunity to work with these people who have thought about this for a long time. But monarch butterflies are so cooperative because they go just to a few spots where they huddle together in trees, like in California or in Mexico, so we can put stickers on them. And then
people see them and report them.
yeah, dragonflies are not so cooperative in how they migrate. They just sort of disperse. They don't come together in one spot, so in my very beginning of my exploration of dragonflies at Crowhassan, I thought maybe I could collect a bunch. And I wrote on their wings with Sharpies, and I thought I could collect them again to see if I could figure out how they move around. I must have collected and marked a couple hundred. I was just on my own out there, putzing around. Guess how many, with the help of the wildlife crew just looking for me, guess how many we spotted?
0.
Yes. So,
Do you think part of it could be that because things don't like to eat monarchs, it's also easier to find recaptures because they're poisonous, whereas green darners are not poisonous, so they're more likely to be eaten?
that's a really interesting question. It's possible. It's very possible.
Well, and that's one of the cool things with the migration of the common green darner is that the kestrels will follow them in migration
Really?
for a meal.
No way. I did not know that.
It's like a buffet on wings.
That's awesome. So the dragonflies are eating like the flies and mosquitoes as they migrate, and then the kestrels are eating them.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. So I found out pretty quickly that it's really hard to study the adults with the whole, we call that a mark recapture technique in scientific terms. I didn't recapture any that I marked.
And it's not, and they're using another tactic. So some of them, not all of them migrate.
Exactly. So then I shifted gears. I'm like, well, if I want to study what they do in winter, I don't live in the South. That's not where they are. What does Minnesota have that's really unique that I could study and take advantage of? Winter and cold and ice.
Yep.
All the stuff that makes it great.
Yeah. So then I'm like, okay, so not all of the dragonflies migrate. Some of them just stay here over winter and they hang out under the ice. They're protected from freezing for the most part by the water. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to study what they do in winter. And that grew into a bigger question about in general, do they respond to temperature? So my dissertation became the connection between temperature and how it affects how these really common dragonflies grow.
And have you found anything interesting you could share with us before your dissertation, or is that top secret?
Oh my gosh, I found out so much. I think maybe the most exciting and cool thing that we came across is, so winter 2017-18, we were sampling in the ponds at Crowhassan. We used a chainsaw and cut a hole in the ice. Actually, Kurt Oyen and Mitch helped me with this. And we swoop out the nymphs just to see what's going on with them under the ice. And about halfway through winter, or a little bit farther, the ice got really, really thick. We have a 20...
We had no snowfall, so...
No snow. It was cold. The bar on the chainsaw was 20 inches long, and we were just barely getting through the ice. So the ice was really thick. And these ponds at the deepest are maybe 3.5, 4 feet.
They're not super
So they're
deep.
shallow ponds.
So what happened to the nymphs then?
All the common green darner nymphs, they all were dead.
That explains why during the same time frame the next spring, we didn't find any green darner nymphs in the pond around Eastman, and we couldn't figure out why.
Yeah, this is called a winter kill event.
Okay.
And some of the species, some other types of dragonflies are adapted to survive this, but common green darners are not. And we can talk more about that later if you want, the difference between the common green darner and other more northern temperate species. But they just keeled over.
So how are they going to resupply their ponds?
That's an excellent question. So they have this, one of the reasons they're so common is they disperse so well. So come springtime, when the weather warms up again and the ice melts, the dragonflies that survived farther south migrate back north in spring and lay their eggs in these ponds. And then we have a fresh new population.
And they're pretty short, too. So even those ones returning, which they're often like the first dragonfly we see in the spring.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They're going to lay eggs. And how long? Because their lifespan in the water can be a little bit shorter compared to some of the other ones.
It all depends on temperature.
So, yeah, that's where the dynamics of where they're laying the eggs can make a difference.
Ask a really scientific question because I'm really curious now.
Yes, I love scientific questions.
Awesome. So I always assumed that migration was genetic. So if the darner parent migrated, the baby would migrate. But what you're saying seems to imply that it's not, because they're coming and restocking the lakes after a kill-off, and it's just then following that, some of them must have to stay there over the winter rather than migrate. Otherwise, our entire population would be migrators, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you hit a really key question on the head. And that's something that we're trying to tease out right now. And I hope my data will help clarify. When there have been some like very preliminary genetic studies of common green darners, and they all seem to be really similar. The genetics in each individuals from all across their range matches pretty closely, which means that they don't have separate habitats that they're only breeding with each other in and becoming more specialized. They're interacting and they're mixing a lot.
I suppose because they disperse so much, it keeps their genes mixed up.
Yeah, and that also gives evidence that they don't have two different populations, like maybe only an overwintering population and only a migrating population. They get all mixed up.
So then how do they decide if they migrate or not?
Yeah, so that's the question. And I think if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, you could argue whether or not it's actually migration or just a different kind of dispersal.
Long-range dispersal.
Yeah, these are the kind of like dorky questions that I like to have like conversations or arguments over with friends.
Well then, but then is it like migration versus dispersal, or is it more of a spectrum with migration on one end, dispersal on the other?
I think
and
it's
they
the
mix
latter.
up?
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
And it all depends on how you define these terms. But really, the question is what drives it, and it's temperature. You know, the whole idea of ecology is what is the effect of the abiotic, the non-living things on the living things.
So you're talking temperature of the water.
Air temperature.
Or air temperature as well.
Yeah, so in these shallow ponds, and I should clarify that I've only been studying shallow ponds that don't have fish.
Okay.
And so these
It
ponds
simplifies some of the variables.
Yeah, so the thing is I started studying ponds with fish at Crowhassan, and these particular dragonfly nymphs are idiots when it comes to fish. They don't have any behaviors that would like prevent them from being eaten. So dragonflies, common green darners, lay their eggs in these ponds with fish, but then they never really grow up to become adults because they get eaten halfway through.
Interesting.
So they do best in these ponds without fish. So the water is so shallow, it really just mimics air temperature.
So then are issues like climate change affecting your study?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the reasons I was really excited about studying this really common species because they're really important. And climate change is changing their phenology or what they do when in their life cycle.
I wonder if that could almost lead to less overwintering because I think with climate change, we're going to have the ponds freezing out more because we have less snow to insulate the ice. So could that lead to less overwintering and more migrating?
I don't know if that would select for less overwintering and more migrating.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's going to be that consistent of an effect with climate change. I think that the thing we're learning about climate change is it's showing us that all of like this really crazy stuff is happening and it's becoming more unpredictable.
It's more of a chaos than it is change.
Right. Although one thing we are noticing is that spring temperatures are warmer, so the ice out is earlier, and fall temperatures are also warmer.
So freeze is later.
Yeah, and so I've been observing anecdotally, because it's not part of my controlled aspect of my study, some interesting things that are happening in fall. So I've been seeing dragonflies emerging in October. I think the fall of 2016 was really warm. And so I observed common green darners emerging well into October, and I think even the first week of November, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And not so great if you are the only dragonfly emerging in the first week of November.
Well, what are you going to eat?
Yeah.
Or who you're going to mate with.
Yeah.
Who are you going, yeah.
They're probably going to fly south, but what if you get caught in a winter storm between? So it's not the best thing for them. And also,
And normally these ones would just wait to emerge till next spring?
usually they would emerge probably up until the middle of October.
And so like the ones that are emerging in November now, would they have just waited till
Yes.
spring?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So other species have different mechanisms that make sure they overwinter at just the right stage in their nymph life cycle, but common green darners appear to be really flexible and can overwinter in any stage. So they would be fine overwintering until next spring.
Interesting.
So we talked about climate change being playing a role. Are there other things kind of working against dragonflies that might be our issues now or might be potential issues?
Yeah, water quality. Because as you guys were discussing earlier, dragonflies spend most of their lives underwater as these aquatic nymphs. And it seems because the way watersheds work, the way like one water body accumulates the pollutants or the good things and the bad things from the land around it into one little spot, that really has a huge impact on how the nymphs grow. which is actually a reason why I wanted to do my research at Crowhassan, because the water quality is fantastic. And I knew that that wouldn't be like a confounding factor in my study. I could be like certain that the impacts I was seeing, the effects, the things I was observing were just the result of natural things. But water quality is something that is hard to bond with. It's kind of an abstract concept. But then when you think about what do you do with water? Oh, you go and you swim in it, or you fish in it, or you sit next to it and think it's really pretty, or you end up drinking it. All of these things, that these recreation events, which is kind of what research and Dragonfly and swooping and all these fun things we do with MDS, that's what makes these ties real.
Well, and from a more practical point of view, too, when you have poor water quality, that decreases dragonflies and other creatures like it, which decreases the predators on biting fly larvae that live in the water, mosquito larvae. And then you have less of the adults flying around eating, like adult dragonfly and damselflies flying around eating the adult mosquitoes and adult biting flies. So having poor water quality and reducing your dragonfly population can really increase the amount of pests that we have flying around, too.
Yeah, that's totally right. So I like to imagine these small, shallow ponds as like Yellowstone. And in the ponds, the common green darner are the wolves. They're the top level predator. So if you do something that impacts them, like there's fewer of them, or maybe there's more of them, depending on what happens with temperature and pollution, that has what we call trophic cascades, which is a fun word of saying it impacts all of the different levels below it. So, like the story in Yellowstone is that the wolves affect the animals that they eat, which affects the animals that they eat, which affects the plants. So ponds are these little microcosms of that same ecosystem idea. So dragonflies are super important when they're on top predators. And in ponds, when they feed fish, they have that middle level role.
Yeah. But on the ponds without the fish, they really are playing that top
role.
level.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been spending like hours and hours and hours in these ponds at Crowhassan, and as far as like the quantity of individual things I catch, like the bottom of like the triangle that are these amphipods. And then there's...
And that's the scuds or the freshwater shrimp.
Yeah, they look like tiny little shrimps.
Yep, we talked about them a little bit in one of our other podcasts.
Yeah, and then there are other kinds of dragonflies and damselflies and other macroinvertebrates, but really on top it's these darners, these common green darners.
Well, they get huge.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really fun seeing them right before they emerge because it's just, the size is amazing.
Yeah.
And you're doing stuff too with like counting the exuvia.
Exuvia, yes. I've collected like over 9,000. My technicians and I have. Yeah. I should state that no scientist ever does her work alone. I've had so much help. There's no way I could have done all of this research, this observational data collection I'm doing in the field without the help of literally dozens of people. So including Angela, who's sitting here. She's helped me a lot. Mitch and Kurt Owen have, and so many undergraduates.
So science is a team effort.
Science is a team effort.
And as a scientist, do you have anything you could advise to people who maybe want to be scientists too? Like, what is a key thing to become a scientist?
Yeah. Do what you love. Find some passion. Have fun with it. And like throw out the window any insecurity you might have that science isn't for you.
Or any question is stupid, or any observation is stupid.
Yeah. I did not think that I could be a scientist as little as, 6-7 years ago. I just didn't have that as part of my upbringing. I didn't have that as part of my social circle. Like I just was really happy being an educator. I was good at it. I'm like, this is where I fit in really well. But then I met Karen Oberhauser and Rob Blair through an education project I was doing with them. And they kind of were like, you should be a scientist. You're good at this. This is something you can do. And they got some funding through the National Science Foundation, and they invited me to come be part of their research team. And I was writing curricula about citizen science.
Awesome.
And then they were mentoring me about how to become a scientist. So I just feel like I want to shout it from the rooftops that you can be a scientist. You don't need to have anything. There's no special wand that somebody shakes over your head and then you are a scientist.
You're not sworn in or anything. No.
Anybody with a sense of curiosity could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So science, in my mind, it's like art. It's a process that's rewarding in its own right, and it's really fun. And you don't have to be the world's greatest artist to have an excuse to want to paint or sculpt, because it's the process that's rewarding. You don't have to make like $1 million piece of art at the end. And science is the same way. The process is rewarding. Your results don't have to be published in Nature to be worth your time.
Awesome.
That's a really good way to end it. And she's just freelancing this, people. She doesn't have it written down.
I know. I kind of sprung my question on her.
Right? I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know if I have anything else after that.
Mm-hmm.
That was really well put.
Thanks. You guys are inspiring.
You too. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. We really appreciate it. This was amazing. I learned so much from this short segment, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to talk about dragonflies anytime, so thank you.
Well, maybe if we get some more questions from our listeners, if you have some topics or questions about dragonflies, please feel free. Email us.
Go to our Facebook page.
Leave a comment. We're more than happy. And again, check out the Minnesota Dragonfly Society. You can maybe meet Mitch and Amy and myself at some of our event and gatherings that we do.
They're so much fun. I love going to those.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us as we uncovered the magic behind dragonflies and damselflies through their unique life cycle and connection to water. Hopefully you are inspired to watch these insects closer and maybe even grab a net to go sweeping or swooping to look closer.
And you could do it anywhere from your backyard to actually going out to these vast wildlife areas. You should probably get permission before you sweep for dragonflies in parks.
Very
we
important.
We don't want you to
step.
go start sweeping and say, "Oh, but Brandon and Angela told me to." They don't necessarily know who
We
Brandon
don't.
and
We're
Angela
not
are
that
at every single
important.
park.
We're
Yeah.
not that
No.
important, people.
So make sure you ask for permission first. Make sure it's okay. But you can do it in your backyard. You can do it by a creek. You can do it by a river. Minnesota is full of amazing habitats, each with their own unique dragonfly, and it's so much fun to see these different dragonflies, hold them, identify them. And what is it, Angela? There's over 150 different species.
Yeah, so we're even still, there could be 151, 152, but a safe number will say 150 different dragonflies and damselfly species in Minnesota.
That's just incredible.
And you can still get a county record. You could still maybe even score a new species to the state.
I was super excited because in 2018, when you had the International Dragonfly Place come, we actually did the survey on my birthday. And that's when I found the Fondonner exuviae, which I found out was a county record for Hennepin County. And I still have that exuviae on my desk because it was my birthday and it was the first county record I ever found. And I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, anyone can still contribute to this. So there is a website that I want to mention called Odonata Central. And this is a database essentially that keeps track of all those county records. It is photo-based, so it's not something you can submit a specimen to. That's something you're going to more have to do through Minnesota Dragonfly Society. But if you have a really good picture that you got of a
Can I just use my phone to take a bunch of pictures?
You can. It can
So then,
be.
what should I photograph?
It can be a little bit tricky to know what to take a picture of depending on the species, but you kind of want to get different angles. So usually one shot isn't going to be enough. The thorax is a really important thing to get.
That's the part where the legs and wings are attached.
Yep, between the head and the abdomen. Getting a shot of the abdomen as well can be really important.
And the
Especially,
abdomen is what most people think of as the tail?
I know, or people think it's a stinger.
Yeah, it's just the abdomen. It's where its guts are.
Right,
And
so-
where it breathes.
So dragonflies get this bad rep. I think anytime an insect's long and pointy, people think it's going to sting them.
They don't sting, though. They don't
No.
have any stingers.
They have no stingers. I will say that, if you're going to poke your finger into that jaw part of its mouth, then yeah, you might get bit, but it's
It's like a little pinch.
It's a little
Unless you're
pinch.
holding a dragon hunter, it's not going to hurt you.
Right, so
and
yeah-
even then, it's not that bad.
So getting good pictures that if you have a male or a female, the claspers, getting pictures of that. A dorsal or top view is important too for some species. So just get a bunch of different shots. You can upload multiple photos. You'll mark your location and someone will verify what species it is. So you don't even have to know for sure what it is. Somebody will vet it for you by going on. So check out Odonata Central. And again,
It's a great way to learn your dragonfly species then.
right. And you can see pictures and look up your county. So if you're in Hennepin County, you want to see what the species list is, you can pull that up on Odonata Central.
There's lots of other ways to learn about dragonflies. A couple of books were mentioned by Mitch that you can check out and start learning more about. You can go to nature centers, whether you're going to Lowry Nature Center or Richardson or Mississippi Gateway Visitor Center or even Eastman. We do all kinds of dragonfly events. We're happy to talk to you about dragonflies. If you go out and you catch them, we're happy to help you identify them. And at Eastman Nature Center in July, we always do an annual Dragonfly Fest. It's lots of fun. You can go out and you can catch dragonflies. You can catch the nymphs. We do all kinds of education about it. And we've been lucky enough to have the Minnesota Dragonfly Society come out and help in the past. Ami Thompson's been there. Mitch Hagg has been there. Kurt Oyen and Kurt Mead. They're not always there, but somebody from the organization does always show up. We're really lucky for that. So that's a fun event in July to check out. And we do it then because we're hoping to find the Plains Emerald and show people.
Yeah, and we're going to keep on this wave of insects as wildlife, which I'm excited about. Our next podcast topic is going to be discussing pollinators and the importance of diversity within our pollinator world.
That should be really exciting, and it's an important topic because we keep hearing about how bee colonies are collapsing. So we're going to kind of look into, what exactly is going on with all these different bees and whatnot. So I'm excited for that. Do you have questions or comments for us? Ideas for a topic for us to talk about? Do you disagree with something we say, or you thought we said something really great? We want to know all of those. You can email us at wanderingnaturalist@threeriversparks.org. Leave us comments on our Facebook page, and please leave us a review where you downloaded our podcast from. Your reviews help our podcast to reach other people. And if you like us and you think we're kind of fun to listen to, tell your friends.
Even a little bit. Just give us a share.
Yeah. Let people know about us. Word of mouth is going to be the best way to keep our podcast going. We need to have people listening if we're going to keep on producing it. So let people know.
And a special thanks to Tom Nisley for arranging the interviews for the podcast, Laura Gerald for editing the podcast, and all of our guests today, which included Mitch and Amy.
Yeah, Mitch did an awesome job talking about where we can find different dragonflies in the Park District, the research he's doing. The research Amy doing is amazing. There's so many questions to answer about green darners.
Keep an eye out for that paper.
Just so cool. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, keep on learning, keep on discovering, because the more you learn and the curious about nature, the more fun your wanderings will be.